What crazy boss story do you have today? I quit my job as a hostess at McCormick and Schmick's Seafood Grill last year because my boss wouldn't let me leave to see my best friend in his last moments. I came into work that morning and went about my usual duties. My mind was already occupied with the thoughts of seeing my friend of 11 years laying in the hospital bed, barely conscious. He had been fighting cancer that rapidly spread throughout his body within a few months. About half an hour into being at work, I received a text saying, "Come to the hospital. He only has a couple of hours left." My heart sank. I ran to my manager at the front lobby and told him the situation and that I needed to leave to see him immediately. I asked him to ask the other hostess to cover me. He asked, "Is your family member in the hospital?" I responded, "No, he's my best friend of 11 years, my oldest friend." My unpleasant, comb-over, sporting boss said, "Well, then that's not that big of a concern. He's just a friend. You need to realize that no matter what happens to your friend, the world is going to move on. You need to decide whether or not you want to work here anymore." In complete shock and disgust, I told him that I was leaving and walked out with my head and middle finger held up high. Obviously, that man doesn't understand the meaning of friendship and relationships. My friend did pass away that day, and I am glad that I left that poor job. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance of saying my last goodbyes to him, a luxury that is denied to many. He was 27. Screw that, dude. No job, not even in this market, is worth not seeing my loved one last time, right? Story 2. I used to work at a veterinary hospital owned by the craziest person I've ever had extended contact with. The owner, we'll call her Mindy, was not a vet herself but secured a rather large loan to open this facility. It was apparent rather quickly she had no idea what she was doing. The highlights of her crazy: spent almost the entire amount of the loan on such construction necessities as a $17,000 fish tank and $13,000 reception desk. Hired a staff of almost 40 people and no plans for how to pay these people past the first month or two of business. I guess she just assumed she was going to open and instantly have enough business to keep the 7 full-time vets she hired busy. Mindy would occasionally become paranoid and focus this paranoia on one person at a time. Every week or so, a new employee would become evil in her mind and she would complain behind closed doors about how employee X was out to get her. This person was nearly always a blameless hard worker who would end up fired. As previously stated, Mindy was not in any way a veterinarian. This did not stop her from walking around in scrubs with Dr. last name stitched on the front. She justified this by claiming she had a PhD in nutrition. Further research revealed she had purchased a degree online from a fake university. Mindy liked to claim that she was formerly married to a fighter pilot who was ended in some war. It was never really clear which one. Again, further research proved this to be quite false. She once used bleach to clean iodine stains from a white dog's fur after surgery. The dog ended up in an emergency clinic a few days later with chemical burns. Mindy, of course, denied any knowledge of how this had occurred. Mindy was a fairly skilled manipulator, and when the paychecks dried up a few months into operation, she was able to concoct stories about investors that were always days away from funding operations. She was thus able to keep a fair amount of the staff working for extended periods of time with no or little pay. She never paid any of the money deducted from paycheck for medical insurance to the actual insurance company after the first month. This, of course, resulted in numerous bounced claims for employees, one of which had a handicapped child. Long after I and everyone I knew had left, she showed up in the local newspaper. Apparently, she had not been able to pay the crematorium that handled Pets' remains. Rather than admit the problem to customers, she started giving people fake ashes in cardboard boxes, claiming that it was their pet. They quickly discovered the deception when the crematorium called them directly to tell them they still had the real ashes. Honestly, that's just the tip of the crazy iceberg, but it's probably the most entertaining parts. Story 3. I work in retail, so a year and 3 months ago, my wife and I were at the hospital. She was in labor, and I was freaking out. So I want to say it was around 7 in the morning when I decided to call work. "Hey, boss guy, this is Dr. Strongbad, PhD. What happened? I'm at the hospital. My wife is in labor." "So? I'm not going to be able to come in today." "Why not?" "You have to come in." My wife is having a baby." "Will you be able to come in today?" "Probably not." "But you have a lot of work that needs to be done. You have to come in." "I can't come in today. Bye." I hang up. I went in the next day and he hands me a long list of stuff to do. He walked off, so I threw it away and went about my day and had an easy day of work. Then I went home to my baby girl. Story 4. At an old job, we had a buggy timesheet system that would randomly screw up or just plain not submit people's time. Most people would try to figure out the issue, but the boss reacted by threatening several times to flat out not pay people if their timesheets weren't in the system on time. So people were just bad about getting their time in, but there were also legit technical issues going on. So time passes and I get a mail saying I need to come to the boss's office to discuss a timesheet issue. She'd bullied other people about it in the past, but I wasn't having that nonsense. I'd prepared myself for this the moment the boss started making threats of not paying people. I get to the office, and sure enough, the glitch had screwed up in my timesheet. The conversation goes like this in the office. Boss, I'm going to need you to sign this disciplinary slip showing that you didn't submit your time. I'm pushing this through this time, but in the future, you need to remember that I can withhold your pay if this happens. Me, I'm not signing that. The system screwed up. Boss, what? Me, I also think you should be careful. I'm not going to do anything, but those threats you've been making about not paying people are really illegal. Boss, I've heard those rumors and I'm sick of them. They're just not true. Now sign the paper. Me, see, I wondered about that myself, and I took the liberty of printing off the state statute for where we live and for state where company was based. They both say those threats are illegal. Just to be sure, I ran it past a few lawyer friends, and they agreed someone would have a pretty strong case if that happened. I smiled at the boss who sat there, staring. Me, again, this is just a friendly meeting. I wouldn't dream of taking any action, but I thought you should know. The boss put my time through. I didn't have any discipline sheet, and crazy boss pretty much steered clear of me after that. There are far more crazy stories, but that one was the most satisfying one. Story 5. I agreed to come in on a weekend and help set up for an event at my job and not get paid. I was dating a guy at the time who was getting deployed. Turns out the last day I would be able to see him was the day I volunteered. I then asked a coworker to cover for me that day because I couldn't make it in, etc. I shoot my boss an email and tell her what's going on. She then responds to me with a full-page email about responsibility and I now have a job and I can't just take off to see my boyfriend leave and blah 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 blah. I was livid. I was not getting paid to do this setup. I actually had someone come in to cover for me, volunteering. He's going to Iraq, so screw you. Well, she realized later that she chewed me out for something she shouldn't have, as I was actually doing her a favor, and it was still going to get done. He didn't come back from Iraq, so I'm glad I got to spend that day with him. Even though she apologized, I felt like she was such an insensitive schmuck for responding to me that way. Even if she had told me no, I would have told her to quit. Story 6. I worked for a very large insurance company that is headquartered about 3 blocks away from the World Trade Center. On the morning of 9/11, we were all shaken up by what was happening up the block. A lot of us that work in downtown Manhattan had coworkers and people we associated with on a regular basis inside the World Trade Centers. A lot of the companies there were bank and insurance related, so we worked with and knew a lot of folks that were inside. Anyway, one of my coworkers was having a meltdown. Her husband worked in the first tower that had just collapsed, and she hadn't heard from him. Her supervisor came over and said, I know that this is a tough day, but the important thing to remember is that we all really need to get these transactions finalized by noon. The supervisor was let go for the incident, and good news, my coworker's husband was safe. He was able to get out of the building without injury. Story 7. I worked at a Blockbuster many years ago in my small hometown. In management, there was a young single mother who had a vendetta against all men or something. Needless to say, I got treated like crap for no reason. I was the only male working there. I gave my 2 weeks notice and I traded my very last shift to some other girl who needed the hours. And I was just done with the place. Well, the day of my shift, my manager calls all angry because I'm not the one there, and I explained to her that I switched. Well, she gets all irate and hangs up on me. She then proceeds to call my home phone over and over and over again, and she would just hang up the phone if I picked up and call right back. I left the phone off the hook so she would get a busy signal for literally 20 minutes or so, and the minute I hang my phone back up, she's blowing it up like it never stopped. It was just like I broke up with my crazy ex or something. Story 8. My entire office just got laid off. However, we are here finishing up work for the last few weeks. I work in a mortgage processing office, so all of our files have to be transferred to the branch that is basically taking our share of the business and keeping their job security. So the underwriting manager down there told the underwriters here that they had to work the weekend and finish up files in a rush manner because their office just can't handle doing all of their work in all of ours. He got an earful of screw off from the underwriting team. Story 9. I worked for a temp agency once at a Toys R Us warehouse one Christmas. All we did was cut the tops off of boxes to reveal the product and place it on pallets. We had 4 people to a table. These tables were low tables so you could easily work on the boxes. Anyways, we often had shifts where they didn't have any boxes for us to cut the tops off of. So they literally made us stand there at our stations and do nothing. Stand there the whole shift. I guess if they were going to pay us, they were going to make us suffer for it. We had this shrew supervisor who would yell at us if we did anything but stand there. No sitting on the tables! I have worked a lot of security jobs and noticed that at a lot of posts, you were preemptively punished for whatever your predecessors have done. Somewhere down the line, a guard messed up, and now everyone that comes after is looked at as a piece of work that needs to be punished. Several places you were supposed to keep an unrealistic round schedule you couldn't possibly make unless you ran it. Yeah, you can be really observant if you are running from building to building or floor to floor in order to make your detect key lock check-in rounds. Freaking hated working security back then. Story 10. We, my boss, myself, and a coworker would browse the internet in our downtime, which was 75% of the day. All of a sudden, after my boss went on holiday for 4 days, he confronted me about my internet history and how I didn't do any work, which I did because all orders were sent out and everything was up to par. He threatened to show my history for those 4 days to the head of the company, and naturally, I was like, what the heck? Anyway, by the end of our conversation, I said, well, if you're going to show him my history for those 4 days, you might as well show the whole year, which he wouldn't because that would fall on him because he is the manager. He stormed off. I found out he emailed the history anyway, so I just quit. I'm guessing he had a poor holiday. Story 11. I cooked for a few of my many years. Chefs are notorious for being difficult and aggressive. My first boss chef would injure the employees if we messed up. He would take a spatula off the grill, dip it in hot fryer grease, and then place the spatula on your arm. I was 16 in high school and didn't want to mess up or be fired, so I put up with it. I remember one time this other kid didn't believe how hot a roux, flour, and oil heated up for gumbo, which is probably one of the hottest things in the kitchen, was. So the chef guy took a toothpick and dipped it in the roux, then rubbed it on the guy's skin. The guy's skin was boiling and I could tell he wanted to cry. I remember another time we were crowding up the line and got ahead of him on plating a lot of food. He took all the plates with food on them and just threw them on the ground, food and all. Another thing he did was he made me and my friend compete for our jobs by having a board with tally marks on it. Every time we messed up, he would put a tally on the board, and after 30 days, whoever had the most tallies was fired. This chef would eventually walk out of his business and wife and flee to Florida, taking $240,000 with him. His wife, who was part owner, would always say, "Name, now you know you can't injure the employees." Another chef I had when I worked at a casino, I was there for a week before walking out. My first day on the job, he put me to train with a guy who had been there for 5 years who was deaf. I was supposed to watch this guy. The first hour on the job, the deaf guy disappears. I had no clue where he went. Turns out he took an hour-long smoke break. And this continued every night. He would be there for 10 minutes, then disappear. Then the chef would get angry at me when I messed up. I just manned the grill the whole time, didn't learn anything about the menu or their operations. I just kept throwing steaks and fish on to order because that was all I knew to do. 2 days after starting, the chef wondered why I was so lost. I told him, because a deaf guy is never here, nor can I communicate with him. The chef then looks at his feet and says, "Yeah, that was probably a bad choice to show you the ropes." The chef got mad at one point and just threw a whole pot of mashed potatoes to the ground, had every cook stop what they were doing to learn how to make proper mashed potatoes. This was in the middle of 4th of July weekend, the busiest day weekend of the year. We got so behind. He never addressed me by name or cared to learn it. I finally took him aside one day when I had enough and said, "I'm Jack Korok's cat and I have been doing this since I was 14. I have managed kitchens." I went on to explain myself and where I saw problems in his kitchen and the overall communication breakdown he has. I delved into problems with his line and how his workers don't respect him. The conversation went great. He agreed with everything I said, and then he said he hated his job with a passion. Then he turned a complete 180, like he was bipolar, looked at me, and he said, "Look, Josh, I don't care who you are or what your experience level is. When you are in my kitchen, you are my grill helper." Not only could he not get my name right, but he didn't give a care about me. The conversation ended, I finished my shift, and never returned. Story 12. I work in self-storage, so I have to carry a hell of a lot of keys around, and so do my two bosses, the company owners. Well, I once left an empty storage room unlocked on a Friday night by accident before going home for the weekend. When I got back into work on Monday morning, I had a note taped to my computer screen saying how disgraceful it was that I left a storage unit open and unlocked, as anybody could have put their items in and put a new padlock on the door. I went to check on the unit and discovered that my boss's keys were still in the padlock from him locking it shut. They both work other full-time jobs with their construction company they also run. That Monday night, we had a break-in and 3 units were open and all valuables stolen. I'd rather leave an empty unit open than leave the keys for locked units lying around for anybody to steal from. Story 13. 2 from the same place, entry-level position, making an entry-level wage. Fine with me, it was still decent. Worked hard at that job, taking on more responsibility, management roles, working late, etc. A year later, at my first annual review, my boss gives me a horrible review. Performance is lacking, needs training in X, should also be able to do Y. He passed it off to HR before reviewing with me. When I review it, I took a look at the conditions I was graded against, the job to pay grades ahead of me. No wonder I wasn't doing it as well as the other managers. I told him about his mistake and he laughed it off, apologized, but didn't bother to fix it with HR. Next one, transferred to a different department. Department head says, "I know you're getting paid hourly, but since times are tough, we'll be working 50-hour weeks and paying you for 40. savvy, and since you'll be working so many hours, if you need a day off here and there, feel free to take it, and it won't come out of your holiday time. So I agree. Started work, things are going great, lots of work, lots of hours, lots of learning. A couple of months in, I need a day off to take care of something. Gave my boss lots of notice for it. He agreed. I take the day off. Following timesheet I put in for my regular 50-hour work week. Boss comes up to me and says, didn't you take a day off last week? Why did you put in for full time? That needs to come out of your holiday time. I explained to him what we had agreed on. Oh, right. Well, next time let me know that you're doing that, okay? 2 more months pass, 50-hour work weeks all along. I need another day off. Go to my boss with lots of notice. Tell him I need a day off. Tell him it'll be a freebie like before. No, you're not working enough hours for that. It needs to come out of your holiday time. Performance starts to slip shortly after. Well, not really slip. I'm doing all the work I'm paid to do. I just happen to do those 40 hours in a 50-hour work week. Boss calls me on it. I tell him my situation and was short paid about 100 hours by this point with no additional time off. He said something like, yeah, and I looked at your pay too. You shouldn't be getting that little for the amount of work you do. See above for my poor boss. 1, but I can't give you a raise since your performance is down. My performance isn't down. It's exactly what it should be for what you're paying me. Give me a raise and see how much I can shine. Couple of months passed, looking for another job, had one offer, fairly decent pay, benefits, the works, decide I'm going to take it. Plan on dropping my 2 weeks notice on Friday. On Thursday, I give my supervisor a bit of a heads up. So I was thinking you might want to get someone in here for training on my job since there's so much to do. I can help train them if you want. An hour later, HR shows up, which is an hour out from where I was currently working. I get called in to my boss's office to have another meeting. Your performance is slipping again. We can't keep having this, so we're going to let you go. Here is HR with your dismissal package. Dismissal package had 5 weeks severance, complete retirement package, which would have been void had I quit, all my holiday pay, reference letters, and 1 year free at a job center to help me find work elsewhere. And my last day was that day. Had they waited until Monday to let me go, they would have saved themselves all of that. So let me get this straight. I get 5 weeks pay, don't have to work for it, and I get to leave 2 weeks before I was planning? If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 14. I had a boss tell me that although he couldn't technically fire me for attending my sister's funeral, my job might not be here in the same form when I get back. Since I had been working there only a few months and I was right out of college, I stayed put. I deeply regret the decision not to go off on him. I haven't repeated that sort of work-life balance mistake. Another one was funny too. I pay for my own cell phone. It's not a work phone. I walk into work at around 9 a.m. and 10 minutes later, there's my boss screaming at me. Apparently, he called 3 times the previous night and I didn't call him back. His last call was like at 10:30 p.m. I wound up laughing in his face and explained that it was my phone, not a work phone, and my phone sits on the counter charging in another part of the house where I can't hear it unless I want to use it, and I didn't want to use it last night. I further explained that if he wants me to be on call 24/7, he can double my salary and I'd gladly answer any tech support questions he had at any time. And then I suggested that giving customers answers right away at 10:30 at night sets up a pretty bad expectation for future interaction, and that perhaps a short reply to the customer saying that we'll be sure to look into it first thing in the morning would have been better. I had a boss once who used the money for our paychecks to buy substances. Apparently, he had some debts and figured he'd stake himself on one quick buy in order to both pay us and his debts. The guy had trouble selling it because he and a buddy had a party and were consuming it all weekend. Got to see a good confrontation that afternoon when he explained why we weren't being paid for another 3 weeks. Had a boss who loved to do Lumberg imitations at work. It was generally pretty funny until the Friday before a 3-day weekend. He's walking around to everyone saying, yeah, I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday. We all thought it was pretty funny. He finally gets to my desk and does the shtick. Yeah, I'm going to need you to come in all weekend. I laugh, haha, very funny. Then he says, without missing a beat, actually, I'm serious about that. We have to work through the long weekend. See you tomorrow morning. I think he realized how funny he wasn't when he got home, and I made him feel as uncomfortable as possible every possible minute of that long weekend. Had a boss who tried to bribe me not to call OSHA because a 100-pound acid-filled battery fell 10 feet off a pallet shelf where it was unsecured and barely missed me. As it happened, I only got mostly doused in sulfuric acid and got away with a couple of minor burns on my hand and arm and not my face or anything. Ruined my jacket, but it missed my head, which it would have crushed like an overripe grape. I stood my ground and was let go not long after for tardiness. How can you work 60-plus hours per week and get fired for being tardy? I do not know. I have a few more, but I'm late. Only put in 12 and a half hours yesterday and need to get into work. Story 15. I used to work at a telemarketing agency. My boss was insane. He used to drink and smoke grass regularly on and off the clock and would frequently make drastic business decisions while totally impaired. As a night shift supervisor, my only coworker and I used to have mandatory nightly conference calls with him, taking us off the floor and away from the 25 sales reps we were supposed to be supervising for 15 to 45 minutes, where he would come up with absolutely absurd business ideals. He did not understand that ideal and idea were two distinct words with distinct meanings that we would need to implement immediately, including overriding the computer-controlled dialer to call regional markets after 9 p.m., which is strictly illegal and extremely counterproductive, randomly suspending work on certain programs to switch to other ones, switching from selling products we and our employees were familiar with to ones we had not yet been briefed on at all, telling us to tell clients to go away and that we were not going to sell their products, which was only a slight breach of contract, randomly deciding there was no need to have a night shift that night 2 hours into the 6-hour shift, and my personal favorite, assigning me my own private bathroom and quote-unquote office, it was a storage closet, because I could be more productive in my own space, away from the sales floor. The best part of all of this was that he would usually have very little recollection of his asinine decisions the next day, and he would chastise us for doing what he told us to do. He was also notorious for rehiring people we had fired. We had free reign to fire people. He specifically told us not to bother him by seeking permission every time we needed to fire someone, and there were countless times when I would walk into work and see someone I had fired the night before. I finally came into work one day and he was nowhere to be found. He had been carrying on a not-so-discreet affair with one of the day shift supervisors and had skipped town with her, and literally thousands of dollars of client money that had been earmarked for employee incentives. God, I hated and loved that place. Story 16. At a movie theater circa May 2010, my boss made me call up Warner Bros. And let them know that under no circumstances were they to send us any more promotional goods for, quote, that stupid action movie that was coming out in July. Apparently, it was just taking up space in the storeroom as she refused to display any of it. According to her, the banners were ugly and the posters were confusing the customers. That was a depressing moment for me. Oh, and that movie went on to gross over $800 million. It was titled Inception. Story 17. I worked at a coffee shop for about 6 months. It was just me and the boss and a cook. She was a nice lady. We hit it off really well at the start. She was a headstrong feminist, and I am too, to a certain degree. We made sandwiches and $5 lunch specials and all kinds of stuff. We became pretty good friends quickly. The cook quit, and my boss told me I would be cooking too. I said, I'm okay with that, but I'm not a pro. I learned some stuff over time, and over time, she started getting inappropriate with me. She was making suggestive comments and flirting with me a lot, but more in like a creepy way. Like I would make a latte and hand the customer the drink, and she would come up behind me really close and say quietly in my ear, "You better clean that dirty little milk stick," referring to the latte foamer. Whatever, I thought it was a little weird considering one of the things we bonded over was how creepy her old boss and my old boss was. It was a really bad winter too, and whenever it snowed, she would be late, sometimes by hours, but I managed. So one day, she tells me to come in at 7 a.m. I said, cool, I'll be there, no problem. I woke up in the morning and there was maybe 2 feet of visibility due to a serious snowstorm. It took me ages to get to work, everything was slow. I got off the streetcar and walked because it was stuck. The 2 feet of snow made it a slow journey. I got to work at 7:30 and was yelled at big time. She was flipping out, saying my male arrogance was trampling her feminine something or other. I was caught totally off guard by this. I asked her if everything was okay, and that's it, and she started flipping out that, quote, no, it's not my time of the month, schmuck, and fired me. So I called her a terrible old person and I left. It was amazing. Story 18. My crazy boss for the day is that I've been working for this company for 2.5 years without a raise. I've been promoted and taken on 6 different job responsibilities since being hired. My boss recently provided a contract for me to sign, locking me in at the same pay grade for 1 year with an additional 18-month non-compete and non-disclosure. I requested a raise to sign and was told I didn't deserve one. I told her I was not going to sign her non-compete and non-disclosure agreement or an agreement locking me in at the same pay rate. She took that offensively as if I were going to work for a competitor or a current client of the company and said it reflected poorly on my personality and professionalism. Story 19. I was once fired from a job because I was, quote, insubordinate. What was the nature of my insubordination? I was new, and I was asking my manager how to do things. I'm a bright, curious guy, so I was also asking why we did things a certain way, especially when it made no sense to me. She was happy to teach me everything she knew and said that I would be a great candidate for management after 6 to 12 months. I took this encouragement at face value and continued learning everything I could about the job. Her boss thought I was gunning for his job, so he made sure to fire me as soon as he had an excuse. His excuse? I was detained as a material witness at a crime scene and could not make it to work. I produced an official police report of the event, but it made no difference. The no call, the no show was the technicality he used, but he made it clear when firing me that it was for being insubordinate. Story 20. I worked 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays and let the other employees in. One morning, I'm not feeling all that well, and about 8:30, I run to the restroom. At this exact moment, my boss calls, and I'm not there to pick up, so he keeps calling. On the third call, a coworker picks up my phone and takes the call. About 9 a.m., my boss calls again. This time, he's screaming that I am late and not to work on time. I explain that he must have called when I was in the bathroom, to which he replies, "Stop lying and admit you were late." At this time, I explain that I let in all of the employees and he will even see correspondence minutes after 8 a.m. My boss, still yelling, asks to be transferred to the HR department to write me up. Since I let the HR manager in to the building, she tried to defend me, but no luck. And since I am a liar, I now work 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Cost me over $400 a month. Story 21. For a year, I worked for a rural nonprofit animal shelter run by the only animal control officer for the surrounding 3 counties. She was, without a doubt, the most neurotic and perhaps psychotic person I have ever met. I have a lot of stories about this woman, but the best one is this, the beaver story. So one day, a series of complicated events that I won't get into here for the sake of the story, and this place was run by me and one other employee, my boss, and a bunch of guys from the state pen up the road doing their community service hours. Typically, the guys from the jail did most of the real menial labor while me and the other employee looked after the animals' welfare, and my boss just kinda dropped by and freaked out periodically. Well, this one day, we lost the jail program. Bam, no more extra help. On that day, I was the only person actually working. For scope, I usually came in and worked for about an hour or so in the morning. But that day, I was there for close to 10 hours. This loss pushed my boss over the edge into irrationality. When lunchtime rolls around, she picks up some grub from Wendy's and we eat it at the exam table. Over our food, we have this casual conversation. Boss, I got a treat for the dogs today. Me? Oh, what is it? Her? Food. The end. I thought it was a little odd that she'd referred to plain dry food as a treat, but whatever, she was crazy and having a rough day. When we're done with lunch, I go out to help her unload the food from her truck, but instead of backing the truck up to the door like she usually does, she parks it in a way so that the back can't be seen from the road. Now, I'm slightly sketched out. She opens the back of the truck, and inside the dog crate she usually keeps back there are 3 beaver carcasses. So, where's the food, I ask, and she looks at me like I'm insane. Wait, you want me to? She nods. But where do I put them? Oh, just on the ground. Speechless, I do as I'm told. Fun fact, beavers are not as small as they looked when I'd seen them at the zoo. Also, these carcasses were so fresh they were still moist. And she just goes to town on them and just hands me pieces and I feed them to the dogs, too confused by what's going on to disengage my good employee autopilot. And when it was all done, she gave me a ride back to my dorm and we never spoke of it again. Story 22. Dumbest thing ever. I get called into my manager's office for time card violations. I work in an office basically, but my position requires me to sometimes be in a room where I am not able to answer the regular office telephone, which by the way is not my job anyway. And during a Saturday shift, it's entirely possible to be here either completely alone or maybe with one other person locked up in a studio who will also not see you while you are there. Anyway, fast forward to my manager calling me in. Apparently, while I was either in one of the studios or in the bathroom, someone had tried to reach the office on a Saturday at 11:50 a.m. Because I didn't answer the phone, it was deemed I didn't work the hours I had put down, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and this is based off of the fact that the guy who eventually, after about 5 minutes, answered the phone, said he hadn't seen me. Meanwhile, I'm in the studio recording things. My boss at the time was so technologically impaired that when I said I had been in the studio where the phone doesn't ring and that I could prove it, he said I would use my computer, quote, wizardry to change the timestamps on the files and just to amend my time card to say I had only worked 2 hours that day. I'm only still here because my manager isn't. Story 23. I was fired the week before Christmas for being sick at work. I worked for a shopping mall. Over the last year, changes were made to our department by people who have nothing to do with our department that resulted in the best and most experience of my coworkers leaving. So, it's the holiday season. We are swamped with people buying gift cards. We're down to 3 people now, whereas the year before, we were fully staffed with 9. And I'm told that I will have to work the last Saturday by myself. The last year of nonsense, coupled with the unpleasant people upstairs chasing my coworkers away at this busy time, came to a head. I began to feel dizzy, weak, nauseous, exhausted, lightheaded. A headache quickly set in. I barely had enough energy to keep my eyes open. It just hit me like a truck. Our temporary supervisor noticed and offered to let me go for the afternoon. I then made an offer. I'll work Saturday on my own if I can also have tomorrow off to recover. She said it was a done deal and off I went. I slept for that afternoon, evening, and the next day. Then I found out that our department manager had been trying to contact me. I was told that because I left work, that constituted job abandonment, therefore I had quit on them. I still felt like terrible, but now I was hurt and confused. Why would they fire me for being sick just before Christmas while they were understaffed? I probably could have fought it, but I remained bedridden for the next week. I couldn't have made it to a doctor. Additionally, I was so fed up with the ridiculous and irrational stuff that was coming down the pipe that I was also kind of relieved to be done with that place. Story 24. About a week ago, this was my conversation on the phone. Me. Hey, I'm not sure if I should drive into work right now. There's a tornado warning out and they're headed our way. Management. Well, you can't be late or you'll be written up. Me. There aren't any orders and I have to endanger my life to get to work. You want me to risk my life just so I can come in and get all my work done even earlier than I always do? Management. A little bad weather is no excuse to be late. Drivers are a dime a dozen. Screw my life. Story 25. I work in a restaurant, in a casino. As everyone knows, servers and front-of-house employees receive grossly low wages from the employer, which I would have never complained about because it's a fine dining restaurant and I receive solid gratuities. What I find to be ridiculous is the fact that management thinks that all servers should donate their time to the restaurant on a day off, coming in and cleaning for a 6-hour period for something like $2.89 per hour while the restaurant is not open. To not participate is unheard of. People would be written up or fired or guilted into feeling that they take no pride in their workplace. But in all actuality, the servers make all of the sales for the restaurant. Their wages are made up of the gratuity of their guests, so I find that management is absolutely nuts to think that I want to cut class, drive an hour, work for 6 hours scrubbing things with toothbrushes and make $12. Story 26. I used to do contracting/construction work with a friend of mine. Our boss was a friend of my friend's family, super nice guy, funny as heck. The only problem was that he was hugely addicted to prescription painkillers. Growing up, he smoked a ton of grass and did a ton of cocaine, so he already had that, quote, addictive personality. He ended up hurting his back and got hooked on Vicodin. Anyway, as a result of this, he would work 30 hours straight, then just crash. Every morning, we'd all meet up at his house, and he'd give us our jobs for the day, and he'd meet up with us later. On one of his crash days, we got to his house at 6 a.m., and he gave us a list of 15 things to do and sent us on our way. Around 2 p.m., he gets to the work site angry, asking what the heck we'd been doing all day. Mike, we've been doing all the stuff you gave us to do this morning. We proceed to show him the list with everything crossed off. I told you to do all that? Oh, okay, cool. I guess you guys can go home then. See you tomorrow. Story 27. I worked for a fairly nice hotel in my area as a valet parker/bellman. My fiance at the time had sickle cell anemia and occasionally would get attacks that required a hospital trip. 3 of my 4 managers were cool with this. 1 was a complete schmuck. So naturally, I'd been there like 8 months, several guest commendations and a raise for good service, and she has an attack mid-shift with my unpleasant boss there. She needs to go to the hospital. Nobody to take her but me. So I go tell my boss what's happening and that I need somebody to cover for me. He says there is nobody and she can wait till the end of my shift. All of the guests' car keys are kept in a locking wooden box that there is only 1 set of keys to open. 1 guy guards keys, 1 guy parks cars. I apologize to the car parker, explain the situation, and give him all of my tip share for the day, and explain he's about to get royally overwhelmed. I then lock the guest key box, take the key off the company ring, and take it with me when I go to take her to the hospital. Nobody can leave, nobody can drop off their cars, huge problem. A coworker calls me later and tells me that guests were furious. The manager ended up having to compensate rooms for them, and it took 4 hours to break into the key box. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for us. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.